The wind howled through the desolate landscape as I trudged along the overgrown path, my steps heavy and purposeful. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a cold, pale light on the decaying structures that surrounded me. The distant howls of coyotes echoed through the night, a reminder that I was far from civilization. I had heard the rumors, the whispers that spoke of a man who lived on the outskirts of town, a man whose name was synonymous with fear. They called him the Chainsaw Man, a moniker that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest souls. His reputation was one of violence and madness, a man who had become one with his weapon of choice. Driven by a mixture of morbid curiosity and a thirst for adventure, I had set out to find him. The stories ranged from tales of vengeance to those of survival, all ending with the chilling sound of a chainsaw's roar. My heart raced as I ventured further, the rustling leaves beneath my feet the only sound that broke the silence. I walked for what felt like hours, my determination unwavering even as doubt gnawed at the edges of my mind. The moonlight seemed to play tricks on my vision, casting long shadows that danced and twisted with every gust of wind. And then I heard it, a distant rumble that sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. The chainsaw's roar grew louder with each step, a symphony of metal and machinery that reverberated through the night. My heart pounded in time with its rhythm, the sound sending a chill down my spine. I rounded a bend, and there he was, the Chainsaw Man. He stood tall and imposing, his silhouette illuminated by the moonlight. His face was obscured by a tattered scarf, and his eyes gleamed with a frenzied intensity. The chainsaw in his hand was massive, its teeth gnashing and growling like a beast hungry for prey. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as the reality of the situation crashed over me. The Chainsaw Man seemed to sense my presence, his head turning in my direction. For a moment, our gazes locked, and the world seemed to stand still. And then, he revved the chainsaw, the noise tearing through the night like a thunderclap. Panic surged through me, and I turned to flee, my feet pounding against the earth. But the sound of the chainsaw echoed in my ears, growing louder and closer with each step. It was as if the Chainsaw Man was right behind me, his weapon of terror mere inches away. I veered off the path, crashing through underbrush and thorns, the branches clawing at my skin. The chainsaw's roar was unrelenting, a relentless pursuit that seemed to defy the laws of physics. As I stumbled through the darkness, a plan formed in my mind. I had to find a way to silence the chainsaw, to end this chase before it consumed me. With my heart racing, I ducked behind a gnarled tree, my breath ragged. The sound grew louder, the vibrations of the chainsaw sending shockwaves through the air. And then, as if guided by a surge of desperation, I lunged out from my hiding spot. With all the force I could muster, I tackled the Chainsaw Man, our bodies colliding in a cacophony of chaos. The chainsaw clattered to the ground, its roar silenced at last. We wrestled on the ground, the moonlight casting surreal shadows as we fought for control. Adrenaline fueled my movements, and with a final push I managed to pin the Chainsaw Man beneath me. His struggles grew weaker and the frenzied light in his eyes dimmed. As I rose to my feet, the silence that followed was almost deafening. The chainsaw lay on the ground, its teeth still and harmless. The man beneath me was defeated, his gaze vacant and defeated. The legend of the Chainsaw Man had been shattered, replaced by a man who had become lost in his own madness. As I walked away from the scene, the memory of the chainsaw's roar still echoed in my mind. The night had been a journey into the heart of fear, a confrontation with a man whose reputation had cast him as a monster. But in the end, he was just a man, a victim of his own demons. And as I disappeared into the darkness, I couldn't help but wonder how many more stories like his remained untold, hidden beneath layers of legend and myth. The woods had always been a place of solace for me, a sanctuary where I could escape the pressures of the modern world. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness settled over the trees, the familiar trails took on an unfamiliar air of foreboding. I walked deeper into the woods, the crunch of leaves beneath my boots the only sound that disturbed the stillness. Moonlight filtered through the canopy above, casting eerie shadows on the path ahead. A faint rustling in the underbrush caught my attention, my heart skipping a beat as I turned towards the source. At first I dismissed the sound as a mere product of the night, a scurrying animal perhaps, but as I continued on, the rustling persisted, now accompanied by soft whispers that seemed to dance on the edges of hearing. I stopped in my tracks, my senses on high alert as I strained to make out the words. The whispers were faint and unintelligible, as if carried by the wind itself. They seemed to come from all directions at once, a chorus of voices that seemed to belong to no one and everyone. My breath caught in my throat as a sense of unease settled over me, my instincts urging me to turn and flee. But curiosity got the better of me. I followed the whispers deeper into the woods, my steps guided by an invisible force that seemed to beckon me forward. The trees seemed to close in on me, their branches forming an intricate canopy that blocked out the moonlight. The path twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the heart of the forest. As I walked, the whispers grew louder, their words still just beyond my grasp. My heart raced, and a chill ran down my spine as I realized that the voices were repeating my name, my own name, spoken in hushed, urgent tones. It was as if the woods themselves were calling out to me, their secrets waiting to be uncovered. With each step, the atmosphere grew more oppressive, as if the very air was charged with an otherworldly energy. Shadows seemed to take on shapes of their own, shifting and morphing in ways that defied logic. My surroundings became a maze of darkness and uncertainty, a place where reality and illusion intertwined. Suddenly, the path opened into a small clearing, bathed in an eerie, bluish light that seemed to emanate from the very ground itself. In the center of the clearing stood a gnarled tree, its twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The whispers grew louder, now forming coherent sentences that echoed in my mind. "Listen," they urged, their words a haunting chant that seemed to reverberate through my very being. I closed my eyes, my heart pounding, and allowed the whispers to envelop me. Visions flashed before my eyes, moments from my past, fears and regrets that had remained hidden deep within my psyche. As the visions subsided, the whispers took on a new urgency. "Forgive," they implored, their voices a chorus of longing and sorrow. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a sense of understanding and empathy washing over me. The forest seemed to sigh in response, the bluish light fading as the whispers slowly receded. I stood alone in the clearing, the woods returning to their familiar state of stillness. The moonlight broke through the canopy once more, casting gentle beams of light on the ground. The whispers were gone, replaced by a profound silence that held a sense of closure. With a deep breath, I turned and made my way back through the woods, the path now clear and unobstructed. The trees seemed to stand taller, their branches reaching towards the sky in silent reverence. The night had transformed from a place of fear to one of revelation, a journey that had led me to confront my own past and find a measure of peace. As I emerged from the woods, I couldn't help but glance back, knowing that the whispers in the woods had been more than just a figment of my imagination. They had been a bridge to a hidden realm, a place where the boundaries between the tangible and the intangible blurred into something far more profound and haunting. The antique mirror had been in my family for generations, its ornate frame and aged glass giving it an air of mystery. It had always hung in the hallway of our ancestral home, a silent witness to the passage of time. But as I grew older, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror held secrets of its own. Late one night, unable to resist my curiosity any longer, I stood before the mirror. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting a silvery glow on the glass. As I stared at my reflection, something shifted. The room behind me seemed to blur, replaced by a different scene. I blinked, my heart pounding as the mirror revealed an unfamiliar room, its walls adorned with tapestries of a bygone era. My breath caught as I realized that the mirror was showing me another time, another place. I watched in awe as figures moved within the room, their faces obscured by the shifting shadows. They spoke in hushed tones, their words a distant echo that reached my ears as if carried on the wind. With a mixture of fear and fascination, I reached out to touch the mirror's surface. As my fingers made contact, a surge of energy coursed through me, pulling me into the reflected world. I stumbled into the room, my surroundings solidifying around me. I was no longer in my own time, but in a grand estate that seemed frozen in a moment of history. The figures from before were now tangible, their clothing and demeanor belonging to a different era. They regarded me with a mixture of surprise and suspicion, their words a language I could barely understand. As I navigated this unfamiliar world, I realized that I was invisible to its inhabitants. I could observe their interactions, hear their conversations, but I was a mere observer, a ghost in a realm not my own. Days turned into nights as I wandered through the estate, growing more accustomed to the rhythms of this alternate reality. But it wasn't long before I sensed a darkness lurking beneath the surface. The figure's smiles held a veneer of politeness, their actions often at odds with their words. As I delved deeper, I uncovered a web of secrets and intrigue that seemed to span generations. Betrayals, hidden alliances, and unspoken desires painted a far more complex picture than the polished facade suggested. With each revelation, the world around me grew more unstable. The tapestries on the walls seemed to shift and writhe, their patterns twisting into unsettling shapes. The air grew heavy with an energy that seemed to pulsate in time with my racing heart. It became clear that I wasn't merely an observer. I had become entangled in the echoes of the past, a participant in a story that had long been forgotten. As I struggled to make sense of the reality I now inhabited, I realized that the mirror was the key to returning home. With a heavy heart, I sought out the mirror within this world, its surface holding the same silvery glow that had drawn me in. With a deep breath, I touched the glass, the energy enveloping me once more. I returned to my own time, the antique mirror's frame now bearing a faint glowing mark where I had touched it. The revelations of the past still lingered in my mind, the echoes of a story that had found its way into my own reality. The mirror had shown me more than reflections. It had opened a door to a world of secrets, a place where the line between past and present blurred into something far more complex and haunting. The abandoned mansion stood at the edge of town, its grandeur now a faded memory. Its windows were shattered, its walls marred by time and neglect. Locals spoke of its eerie past, of tragedies that had befallen its previous inhabitants, but to me it was simply an opportunity for urban exploration, a chance to uncover the mysteries that lay within. One gloomy afternoon, armed with a flashlight and a sense of adventure, I ventured into the mansion. The air was heavy with the scent of dampness and decay, and the floorboards creaked underfoot. As I explored room after room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, as if the very walls were watching me. In one room, my flashlight's beam revealed a collection of dusty porcelain dolls arranged on a worn velvet couch. Their glassy eyes seemed to follow me, their painted smiles a stark contrast to the unsettling atmosphere of the mansion. I shivered, my imagination running wild as I imagined the dolls coming to life in the darkness. With a nervous laugh, I turned away from the dolls and continued my exploration. The mansion seemed to stretch on forever, its halls winding and labyrinthine. At times, it felt as though I was walking in circles, the rooms shifting and changing around me. The air grew colder, and a sense of isolation settled in, as if the mansion itself wanted to keep me within its grasp. As night fell, I found myself in a room that was different from the rest. The walls were adorned with faded wallpaper, and a single window cast a pale glow on a small ornate crib in the corner. My breath caught as I approached. The crib held a porcelain doll, its features delicate and lifelike, its glass eyes unblinking. I couldn't tear my gaze away from the doll. There was something about it, something that seemed to radiate an energy that both fascinated and terrified me. Its expression held a hint of sorrow, a depth of emotion that was impossible for mere porcelain to convey. I reached out to touch it, and a jolt of electricity shot through my fingertips, causing me to recoil in shock. The room seemed to darken, the air growing thick with an unspoken presence. A soft, haunting melody filled the air, as if carried on a breeze that came from nowhere. The crib's wheels creaked and the doll's glass eyes met mine, its lips parting as if it was about to speak. "Help us," the doll whispered, its voice a fragile echo that sent a shiver down my spine. "We've been trapped here for so long, forgotten and silenced." My heart raced as I realized that the dolls were not just lifeless trinkets, but vessels of trapped souls. Their stories were a chorus of pain and longing, their existence a cycle of torment that had spanned generations. The mansion itself seemed to hold them captive, a place where time and reality had twisted into something far more sinister. As the melody grew louder, the walls of the room seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The dolls' voices merged into a symphony of whispers, their pleas for release mingling with the haunting melody. With a surge of determination, I made a choice. I would help them find peace. I reached out and gently cradled the doll in my hands. Its glass eyes seemed to shimmer with gratitude, and the melody swelled to a crescendo. The room filled with a blinding light, and for a moment it felt as though the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. When the light faded, I found myself standing in an empty room. The crib was gone, the dolls vanished, and the air felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. The mansion seemed to sigh, its walls no longer watching, its halls no longer twisting. As I left the mansion, I knew that my encounter with the silent dolls had been more than just a chance exploration. It had been a journey into the heart of a haunting, a confrontation with the restless spirits that had been trapped within the porcelain figures. The mansion may have been abandoned, but its halls still echoed with the stories of those who had been silenced for too long. As I navigated this unfamiliar world, I realized that I was invisible to its inhabitants. I could observe their interactions, hear their conversations, but I was a mere observer, a ghost in a realm not my own. Days turned into nights as I wandered through the estate, growing more accustomed to the rhythms of this alternate reality. But it wasn't long before I sensed a darkness lurking beneath the surface. The figures' smiles held a veneer of politeness, their actions often at odds with their words. As I delved deeper, I uncovered a web of secrets and intrigue that seemed to span generations. Betrayals, hidden alliances, and unspoken desires painted a far more complex picture than the polished facade suggested. With each revelation, the world around me grew more unstable. The tapestries on the walls seemed to shift and writhe, their patterns twisting into unsettling shapes. The air grew heavy with an energy that seemed to pulsate in time with my racing heart. It became clear that I wasn't merely an observer. I had become entangled in the echoes of the past, a participant in a story that had long been forgotten. As I struggled to make sense of the reality I now inhabited, I realized that the mirror was the key to returning home. With a heavy heart, I sought out the mirror within this world, its surface holding the same silvery glow that had drawn me in. With a deep breath, I touched the glass, the energy enveloping me once more. I returned to my own time, the antique mirror's frame now bearing a faint, glowing mark where I had touched it. The revelations of the past still lingered in my mind, the echoes of a story that had found its way into my own reality. The mirror had shown me more than reflections. It had opened a door to a world of secrets, a place where the line between past and present blurred into something far more complex and haunting. As I stumbled out of the tent, my friends looked at me with concern. The carnival around us seemed to pulse with a new energy, the rides coming to life with eerie lights that danced in time with the wind's mournful melody. Panic gnawed at my insides as I realized that the figure had revealed things about me that they couldn't possibly have known. With each step, the carnival seemed to shift and change, its attractions twisting into grotesque versions of themselves. The air grew thick with a palpable malevolence, and I could hear whispers carried on the wind, a chorus of voices that seemed to speak to me alone. My heart raced as I realized that the figure's touch had opened a door to something beyond my understanding. In a desperate bid to escape, I ran, my friends close behind. The carnival seemed to close in on us, the twisted rides reaching out with skeletal arms. Just as we reached the entrance, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the candle in the fortunes-told tent. The carnival fell silent, the wind's melody fading into the distance. We emerged from the grounds, our breath ragged and our hearts still racing. The carnival behind us looked as abandoned as ever, a mere relic of the past. But we knew the truth. We had stumbled upon something ancient and malevolent, a force that had woven itself into the very fabric of the forgotten carnival. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the memories still haunt me. The figures in my fortune still whisper in my dreams, their warnings and revelations etched into my mind. The carnival may have appeared abandoned, but I know better. It waits, a portal to a world of secrets and shadows, a place where the line between reality and the supernatural blurs into something far more terrifying.